Hello, everybody. Hi, I am Ila Adhikari from Nepali Women in Computing, your moderator for the session. And I'd like to welcome you all to the 11th session of NWiC Educate, Cultural Heritage Conservation with Sambid Bilas Pant. Thank you all for joining us, and please feel free to turn on your videos.
All right, thank you, Ila.
First of all, I'd like to talk a little bit about NWiC. So as many of you might not know, NWiC is a Anita B Sisters community of Nepali individuals passionate about technology, about diversity and inclusion in tech. So this is a platform for all of us to come together and bring other Nepali technologists to share our stories, learn from each other, and encourage women and other minorities to thrive in tech. And NWiC Educate is our monthly session that we started to learn and be aware of different issues existing in our society, ranging from gender equality, animal rights, and the one we're having today. So it's basically a space for all of us to discuss and debate about social issues that are often misunderstood, misinterpreted, and underrepresented. Now, I'd like to talk a little bit about our speaker. First of all, thank you so much for being with us today. So Sambid Bilas Pant has been working as an independent writer and photographer for almost a decade now. And as a writer, he's passionate about history, folklore, art, and heritage exploration. And he's a firm believer that writers need to contribute towards conservation of heritage through their stories. Dear participants, please drop any questions that you might have on the chat box. We'll address them towards the end. Now let's begin with the presentation. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Ila, for the wonderful introduction. Yes, so this topic is actually very close to my heart because I'm very passionate about history and culture and art. And my first introduction to cultural heritage was when I was 9 years old. When I visited the Chhaoni Museum or the National Museum with my mother and my sister, and I was fascinated when I saw those old coins, art, and weapons and all these things. And I've been curious about cultural heritage ever since. And cultural heritage is actually a very broad topic. And in this presentation, I'm going to discuss about conserving cultural heritage and tangible heritage in particular. All right, so let's begin. Yes, my presentation is divided into 3 parts. The first part is the introduction part, where I'll introduce everyone to the topic, and I'll discuss about the type of cultural heritage and why we need to protect cultural heritage. Then next, I'll move to tangible heritage that needs saving, where I'll take you on a virtual tour of several heritage sites that actually need saving. And finally, we'll discuss about how to protect heritage. And that's a very important topic. All right. Cultural heritage can be defined in different ways. It can be defined as cultural resources that are inherited from past generation, preserved in the present generation, and bestowed for the benefit of the future generation. Although the question is, are we actually preserving the heritage in present? So there is a desperate need to critically study, comprehend, and identify the different challenges and issues related to heritage conservation. And the aim of this particular presentation is to highlight the urgency to preserve, conserve, and recognize the challenges and issues related with heritage conservation. Yes, so cultural heritage can be classified into different types. Here I have classified it into 2 types: tangible heritage and intangible heritage. Tangible heritage can further be classified into immovable heritage and movable heritage. Immovable heritage can consists of ancient sites, palaces, temples, stupas, monasteries, mosques, gurudwaras, buildings. Basically, when you think of immovable heritage, you can think of the heritage sites of Kathmandu, such as Pashupatinath or Swambhunath or Bodhanath or Changunarayan, the three Darbar squares. These are all these all fall in this category. When it comes to movable heritage sites, we can think of artifacts, sculptures of different gods and goddesses, kings, paintings, documents, inscriptions, the beautifully carved windows that we see in heritage homes or different palaces. And intangible heritage refers to the kind of heritage that we may actually not see, but we can actually experience and feel, such as language, folklore, legends, rituals, oral traditions, and different skills that are passed on from one generation to the next. And conservation of intangible heritage is also very important. My personal experience is about intangible heritage is how language is disappearing every year. I'll give one of my personal examples. So my grandfather was Pandit, and he wrote several books in Sanskrit language about Hinduism, about religion, about rituals, about spirituality. And unfortunately, I can't read them because I was never taught Sanskrit in school. And sadly, the generation after me might not be able to read it as well. And all those ideas that he has put on his books will disappear. And it also consists of folklores, legends, rituals, oral traditions. And anyone familiar with my work know that I write a lot of stuff on history, legend, mythology, folklore. And whenever I visit these heritage sites to find out about the origins of these sites, what I have noticed is the folklore, mythology, legends are slowly disappearing because only the older generation or the generation above 80 know about these legends, and the younger generation actually have no idea about origins of different monuments. So this is also very important. Talking about why we need to conserve cultural heritage, there are different reasons for it. Heritage sites tell stories. They tell stories of kings and queens, about rise and fall of different kingdoms. They tell stories about shamans, magicians, but actually they tell stories of morality, ethics, and pass on practical knowledge that we can actually use even today. And wealth of knowledge and skills are transmitted from one generation to the next because of cultural heritage. So it's very important to protect them. Whether it is artistry or craftsmanship or different types of handicraft skills, it is passed on from one generation to the next. And it is also our connection to the past, whether it is record of certain events, happenings, or different historical figures. And cultural heritage attracts tourists as well from all social strata, religions, and nationalities. I remember 4 years back when I visited Panauti. Panauti is a cultural heritage site, which is about 25 kilometers away from Kathmandu. So when I visited Panauti, there was a beautiful neoclassical building, which was actually a fusion of neoclassical architecture and Vastukala, because the building, the column, everything was neoclassical, but the windows were Neva windows. And I was there, and there were 2 German tourists who had arrived all the way from Germany just to study those heritage buildings. So it attracts tourists from different parts of the world. And since Nepal depends on tourism for finances as well, so it's good for the economics as well. And it is also the legacy of physical artifacts and intangible attributes of group or different groups or societies. As we know, Nepal has more than 125 caste and ethnic groups, and they have their own physical artifacts or intangible attributes that need to be preserved. It also reflects rich and diverse creations of humankind. Last month, I was in Nepalganj. I was exploring the streets of Nepalganj, and I saw a temple, a monastery, a mosque, and a gurudwara in the single street. So these heritage sites reflect rich and diverse creations of different cultures and different groups. And of course, it can be documented and studied for its history, art, and architecture. People are still studying about pyramids in Egypt. They still want to know why or how these pyramids were created. And these heritage sites help us to find this. Now I'll move on and describe a few heritage sites, particularly tangible heritage sites that need saving. The sculpture that you see on the screen is the sculpture of a stone sculpture of Jazzarkot in Chassel. This is actually located only a few meters away from the Patan Darbar Square, and it is considered to be more than 2,000 years old. So the reason it is called Jazzarkot is because it is Lakshmi with elephants. So let me show it. Yes. So the elephants flanking her are actually pouring water from the trunks here. And it has some very unique features. For example, the anklets on her feet and the fallen shawl. These are attributes of sculptures that were made in the 1st century AD. So this is a very old sculpture, and it is actually facing damage, decay, or even loss due to age and weathering. This kind of sculptures actually need a lot of maintenance. They need dusting or regular cleaning or cleansing, and the sculpture restoration is a major problem facing this kind of monuments. And when I actually went to this particular site to, looking for this sculpture, I couldn't actually find it because it is not noticeable at all because it was covered in moss, and the walls around it was also covered in moss. And the people have actually put the goddess behind bars because they actually think that they're protecting it from being stolen. And so it's very disappointing to see the condition of this sculpture. And it is not under a roof also. So it is open, exposed to sunlight, acid rain, everything. And so this is one of the sculptures which might not last very long as well. Next, I'll talk about another monument, which is in Lalitpur. It is in Kokana, Lalitpur. Kokana itself is a cultural heritage site. If you have been to Kokana and you have taken a walk in the streets of Kokana, you will feel like you have traveled back in time. It's a medieval town where people still do harvesting, people still do the farming in old school manner. They still produce oil and beaten rice in meals, the old school way. So it's a beautiful site. In fact, in 2020, there was conflict between the locals of Kokana and the government because the government was planning to build a smart city in Kokana, and they wanted to build modern infrastructure. They wanted to buy the farms there and destroy all these old monuments in this region. And the farmers were actually protesting. The government wanted to connect the fast track from Tarai to Kathmandu via Kokana, and the monuments like this could actually be lost forever if the authorities don't focus on the importance. So this particular house that you see is the first ever house to be lit by electricity in Nepal, the entire history of the country. So Nepal became the second country in Asia to construct a hydroelectric power plant in 1911, and it was commissioned by Rana Prime Minister Chandra Samset. The Ranas actually invested in this project because they, of course, wanted to light up their palaces, but they needed to try this electricity for the first time somewhere. So they tested the electricity in this 3-story house to ensure it was safe because they didn't want fire or short circuit in their palaces. Why this particular house was selected by the Ranas remains a mystery. But according to some locals, the owner of the house actually worked in the power plant. So they chose one of those people, and local testimonies suggested that there were hundreds and thousands of people surrounding this place, this particular house, to see the electricity or the electric bulb shine in the night for the first time in their neighborhood. So it is quite famous. So sad part of this house is the house was actually abandoned in 2015 after the earthquake. And as you can see, the board suggests that it's a museum, but you can also see a big lock there because this house was abandoned after the earthquake. It needs serious renovation. And it says it's a museum, but it's of no use if it is in this state for a long time. So this is one of the important monuments that need saving. Next, we go to Kathmandu from Lalitpur, and this is the Paltan Ghar, or the platoon house in Asan. Asan, as you may know, is a popular open-air street market in Kathmandu, and people visit the market to buy different things, but it is also a historical place. In fact, Asan was one of the places which was used as quarantine hotels, used for quarantine hotels from 13th century till the 19th century. So even before the concept of a pandemic or concept of coronavirus, Nepal actually had quarantine hotels or houses used by merchants and business people whenever they travel to Lhasa or they traveled on the Silk Route, India and different places. They had to stay in houses in Asan for 2 weeks before they could go back to their families. So this is a very historical place as a whole, and there are a few buildings which were used for quarantine and they still stand, but this one is different. This is the first private house in Nepal to have glass windows. So before this, actually, glass windows were not allowed for commoners or anyone outside of the royal family. So glass windows were only seen in royal palaces or people belonging to royal households. So this was built in 1776 by Commander-in-Chief of King Prithvinarayan Shah's Gorkhali army, Abhiman Singh Basnet. He built this house not only to house himself, but also 72 troops. So this can also be known as the first army barrack of Nepal. So this was huge, and it had 7 courtyards. And after the death of Abhiman Singh Basnet, these courtyards were actually used for outdoor sports and wrestling matches enjoyed by the kings and ministers. So this house has a lot of history. So let's look at the architecture of this house. There are actually engravings of 72 soldiers in this house. As you can see, there are different soldiers engraved here. And the interesting thing about it is each of these individuals are different when it comes to the way they are, the kind of uniforms are based on their ranks. So some of them are carrying musical instruments, some of them are carrying weapons. And this central figure on a horse is supposedly Abhiman Singh Basnet himself, the commander-in-chief. And these are the windows of the house. So look at this. It hasn't been maintained and it has been untouched for many years, but it's still so beautiful. It's inspired by Mughal and European architecture. It's kind of a fusion. And the carvings of the engravings of the soldiers are below this window. And out of the 72 engravings, only few remain. And this house might not survive another earthquake if not looked after well. So from Kathmandu, now we go to Bhaktapur, to Madhyapur Thimi. So when we think of palaces, we mostly think of Kathmandu Darbar Square or Patan Darbar Square or Bhaktapur Darbar Square, but there is another Darbar or palace, and that's in Madhyapur Thimi. And it was built by King Ranajit Malla, the final king of Bhaktapur, for his beloved queen. And it houses a temple of goddess Toleju, which is a common feature of all royal palaces in Nepal. And although it is currently being renovated, it rarely has visitors because it's situated inside the premises of a school. And so that means if you want to visit this palace, you either have to go after the classes end, after 5 p.m., or you have to visit on Saturdays, which is very disappointing because heritage sites should be open for the public all the time. And schools can actually be moved to other buildings. And these kind of buildings have significant importance. And Madhepur Thimi is actually a very ancient city. And a lot of renovation works have been successfully done here. In the past 2 years, about 4 ponds have been revived here. So I hope this palace can also be revived. But this is not the only monument that is inside a school. So this is the Badeswar Mahadev. So a lot of you know about Baneswar, New Baneswar, Old Baneswar, but Baneswar is actually named after Badeswar Mahadev. So this is a very old temple. So Badeswar was the capital city of Kathmandu Kingdom when King Bhumi Barma ruled the city. So in around April or May in 2020, during the lockdown, what happened was, since the school was no longer in operation, so I forgot to mention, this is inside a school. This is inside the Ratna Rajya school, which is quite popular. And during lockdown, maintenance work was being done there, and some extraordinary discoveries were made, archaeological discoveries in the region. So I'll show you some of the pictures. So statue of Nandi the bull, huge ancient bricks similar to the ones found in Lumbini. So as you can see, these all things were discovered in 2020, as late as 2020. And I was in this site when they discovered this place and took the photographs. And unfortunately, there was another bull that was there, but it was stolen. And now you can not, so a Sivalingam was discovered as well. You can see it on your right. And now, unfortunately, they have covered it. It's not visible for the public. And because it's inside a school, I wanted to actually take the picture, the recent picture, but now it was used for the elections, so I couldn't take photos. And this is also inside a school, so visiting hours are limited. During examination, you can visit this temple. So how silly it sounds. All right. So from Kathmandu, now we go to Jazzarkot. And when you think of Jazzarkot, you probably think it's one of the most remote locations of Nepal these days. In fact, it's so remote that one of the locals told me that it's easier to heal yourself inside your home than to visit the hospital in Jazzarkot because it's so far and unreachable. And I actually decided to visit the hospital myself. And I went there, and you have to hike to reach the hospital there. And from West Rukum, I hiked to Jazzarkot. And there is a suspension bridge that connects West Rukum with Jazzarkot. And the suspension bridge actually has holes in them. And one of my feet got stuck inside one of those holes. And since I'm a big guy, I survived, but a small kid probably would have fallen on the river. So it's quite a dangerous place. This is where the history gets interesting, because in the 18th century, this was not a remote location. This was one of the most prosperous states in Nepal. So out of one of the 22 principalities, or Baisya Rajya, which was called then, that ruled the area around Karnali and Beri River Basin. So, and the Jazzarkot Darbar was considered as one of the most luxurious palaces in entire Nepal. It was a 7-story palace with all the facilities in the world. And King Prithvi Narayan Shah, during the unification process, he decided to become friends with the king of Jazzarkot who built this darbar, that is Haris Shah, because he knew he couldn't compete or he couldn't beat him in battle. So it was a beautiful palace back then, but it was damaged by the earthquake. The first earthquake of 1934, the Nepal-Bihar earthquake, and later it was renovated, but only 3-story of this palace was renovated. And later, from 96 to 2006, during the armed conflict of Nepal between the Maoist forces and the government, this palace was actually used as a battlefield. So a strange thing is, when I was walking around the palace, I actually discovered a bunker in the palace, which was used by the soldiers during the armed conflict. And it was severely damaged during the war as well. Now it houses a district administrative office. So unfortunately, people don't have access to the palace. It's actually administrative office. And just beside this building, there is another courtyard, even more beautiful than this. But I wasn't allowed to take photograph of that particular courtyard because apparently it's the residence of CDO, and which was quite shocking for me. And I talked with the locals, and they actually want this palace to be converted into a museum, because when you think of Jazzarkot, you don't actually think of any tourist destination or any place that can attract tourists. So they want this to be converted into a museum. This is one of the necessities of that place. Next, we go to another place in the Karnali region. This is the Kakre Bihar Surket. You can say that this is one of the most beautiful temples I've ever seen. So it has the most unique stone carvings in the country. It is a Hindu Buddhist temple because there are carvings of both Buddha and different Hindu icons there as well. And this particular temple remained hidden in the forest for years, and it was only discovered by archaeologists in the 20th century. So when King Birendra was just a prince, he visited Surket and he asked one of the locals, what are the sites that has potential to be a tourist destination? And he took King Birendra, or Prince Birendra at that time, to these ruins. And he gave them the land, he gave them the budget so that they could look after this particular temple. And this is actually one of the better example of renovation of different heritage sites. How old is this temple is a question that has been debated a lot. Some people say it was built during the reign of Ashok Challa, who was a Khas king. Some say it was built by his father, Krachalla Deva, who ruled before him. And so it's quite debated, but one thing that is not debated is it was, of course, built in the 13th century by the Khas kings. So let me show you one picture. Yes. So credit for this photograph goes to TripAdvisor, because I didn't have photograph of this renovation work. So as you can see, this is one of the better examples of how heritage sites can be revived or renovated through the knowledge and skills that are passed from one generation to the next. So the local government actually brought a lot of craftsmen from Bhaktapur and different places of Kathmandu to reconstruct this temple, and it has been actually reconstructed quite well. However, there are a few issues that I noticed. So there are a lot of artifacts like this, small pieces of sculptures and different monuments that are spread everywhere in the forest. And I didn't see any security, so anyone can actually pick these artifacts and go away without being caught, because there is no security there, and this kind of artifacts are everywhere in the forest. So many people actually believe this is not the only monument in the forest, and there are ruins throughout the forest. So a lot of work needs to be done here. And it's not just the sculptures and artifacts that we have in our country. There are a lot of sculptures and monuments that have been stolen and that have been looted and now they are inside international museums or private collection of millionaires. And these monuments go to the auction house every day, and they fetch thousands of dollars or millions of dollars. And so we need to address this issue very seriously, because theft and export damage these sculptures and art. There are a few people who believe that they are a safe place and people can enjoy them, but that's not a fact, or that's not how it should be seen, because these sculptures of gods and goddesses in particular are worshipped daily. They are fed, they are bathed, they are dressed like living beings, and they are identity of any place. So we need to bring them back. So this is about the stolen Nepali arts and artifacts. So the question is, how can we protect the heritage or cultural heritage? That's a question. And this heritage cycle tries to answer that question. From enjoying different cultural heritages comes a thirst to understand. By understanding the importance, the significance of this place, people will value it. By valuing it, they will want to care for it. And by caring, it will help people to enjoy it. So one particular example could be, let's say, Garden of Dreams. So Garden of Dreams is a popular tourist destination of Kathmandu. It is also a popular dating spot, or people see it as natural library because people go there and spend their time with their friends and family. Some people just read books there. But many people don't know that the garden is actually more than 100 years old. It was built by Field Marshal Kesa Samser, who was the son of Chandra Samser, and he built a massive garden to represent the 6 different Nepali seasons. So there were 6 different gardens, 6 different pavilions to represent 6 different seasons. And it was inspired by the European royal gardens that he saw when he visited England and different parts of Europe with his father. So he tried to replicate that garden and built it. The garden was then later handed over to government of Nepal after he died, but it was not rebuilt until 2009, and it was revived in 2009. People now go there to have a wonderful time, but once they understand the historical importance of this garden, they will start to value it. They'll try to learn about the different other monuments close by. For example, the Kesar Library is very close to the garden, which is the first library of Nepal. And there is also the Kesar Mahal, which needs renovation. And they will want to care for it once they know the historic significance of this. And it will help people enjoy it by caring it. And again, this cycle will go on. So this is how heritage sites can be protected. And of course, the local community plays a very crucial role for the protection. It's quite easy to blame the local government or the central government. They are not doing anything, but it's up to the people to take the initiative to promote their own heritage sites, because they are actually the stakeholders. So this is all about heritage sites from my side. Thank you very much for listening. And if you have any questions, I would love to hear them, or I would like to answer them as well. Please.
Thank you. It was really a great presentation. Ekdamai informative थियो. We have a question in the chat box from Ada Thapa. Are there any laws regarding these challenges? Acknowledging, valuing, enjoying, and caring can be done in individual levels, but are there any efforts from the government side?
So of course, there are laws. For example, you can't just demolish any historical building without the government's initiative. But I have been to different ruins. For example, there is a ruins of Kirati Palace, very close to Patan Darbar. It is known by the locals as Patuk Darbar, right? So no archaeological excavation has been done in that place, but the locals, they say it's a palace belonging to the Kirat kings. So I tried to go there, but what I came to know that it had already become a private property. So public had no access to that place. So the rules, the regulations, they play no part when it comes to monuments, sadly. Although there are some efforts made by the government, the Rani Pokhari was in fact revived by the government, by the local government, but after protests, because they were actually planning to convert it into an artificial pond or something like a swimming pool, and the locals protested and they had to renovate it. There are great examples, let's say in Madhipur Thimi, where they have done wonderful job of conserving different heritage sites. Another example could be Bhaktapur, where they actually, the local government doesn't try to take any fund from any other countries. They want to rebuild the monuments that have been damaged by themselves. So there are a few things done by the government, but not at the level that is expected. Are there any questions?
Yeah, there's another question by Dilasha Casey. Has there been any initiative to retrieve the stolen artifacts?
Yes, of course. Nowadays, with the social media and different mediums for people to know about what kind of artifacts is hiding in which part of the world, people are actually taking initiatives, and different sculptures have actually been returned, particularly from the US and different other countries as well. The Lakshmi Narayan Temple, Lakshmi Narayan sculpture was the recent one which was returned to Nepal, but there is an ethical line between this, because the museums, even though they know that it's from Nepal, because I visited a few international museums myself, and they actually have one information about or photographs suggesting where it was originally from, yet they have the morality or lack of it to present it in their museum. So there's a question of that. And one particular challenge is, how do we prove that those sculptures are Nepali sculptures? Because photography came to Nepal very late, and the sculptures are actually never allowed to be photographed in Nepal. You might have seen the signs, no photographs, don't click photos, something like that. So if we don't have photographs, how can we prove that the cultural sculptures belong to Nepal? So that's a big challenge. So it is happening, but there's a long way to go.
Okay, there's another question. If anyone is interested to document about heritage sites in form of research articles, blogs, how easy is it to get the authentic information and guidance? Is there a government resource we can reach out to as of now?
So I actually write articles on different heritage sites, cultural monuments, and so on. Government actually, to be honest, has very limited piece of information. What you get from the government is what you get from Wikipedia, as simple as that, right? To know the real stories, you have to actually visit the site, you have to talk to historians, you have to talk to anthropologists, you have to talk with the locals, because oral tradition is something that is keeping the knowledge alive. So this is, for me, that is the best source, because whenever I visit a certain temple, I talk to the locals, particularly the older generation, to get information from them regarding this. And of course, I talk to historians as well, but very little excavation or archaeological study has been done in Nepal without international support. So that's a big challenge.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I have a question, Ila. Thank you, Sambid, for the presentation. It was really informative. I mean, so many things which we were not aware about, like you presented that. And like you said earlier, the present generations are not really aware about the culture heritage and a lot of things. And sadly, I feel like I'm one of them. I'm very ashamed about that, but I'll just make sure I keep up to date with the things. But adding to that, I wanted to ask, what's the current situation of Kokana? I mean, I know these were all over the media, but what's the current situation like?
So basically, what's happening is, like I said, it's it's a cultural heritage site in itself, right?
Mhm.
So what I came to know was just a few years back, there was a sculpture that was discovered there, which is hundreds of years old, close to 900 years old. There is a well, which is a very primitive well, right? So there are a lot of things, archaeological study that needs to be done there. That is one part. And basically the locals, so Kokana is actually a very interesting place because it's the only place in Kathmandu Valley where people don't celebrate Dasai. It is isolated from
Okay.
rest of the world, rest of the valley, and they have their own unique culture where instead of celebrating Dasai, they celebrate a jatra which is known as the Sikali Jatra, which is quite different. It is a masked dance festival. So the lifestyle is still, although there are a few modern buildings, you still see traditional mud houses there. The lifestyle is so quite similar to what it used to be, let's say 100 years back. People still do harvesting. You still see people working in the farms. You still see old mills producing oil. So they want to live their life the way it used to be. And they are not big fans of, let's say, smart city or fast track. And some of them were willing to actually sell their farms, but government was not willing to give them the right price, right? That is also one thing which was concerning them, even though some of them might actually be willing to sell their land for the smart city and build their house somewhere else. The money that government was giving or offering was not sufficient. So there is kind of conflict there. So that's the situation we're at right now.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, any other questions?
Yeah, I have a question. So Sambid, yeah, really very informative talk. तिमीले भन्यो कति यो मूर्ति मन्दिरहरूको बारेमा थाहा पनि थिएन मलाई, so it was really informative and I enjoyed a lot. So my question is again coming back to the Kokana case, हैन? अब as time goes on, there should be development, हैन? अनि so my question is, so when the development plans are made by the government, so do they also think about the heritage conservation? Is there like a separate body which looks after it, or the burden is over the locals only? So how the balance is maintained?
So the Kokana case is just one of the examples of how the government doesn't try to understand the sentiments of the locals. So if they actually understood the sentiments of the locals, they would have maybe tried to integrate development with history or culture in a certain way that might be good on both sides. And I actually don't think that every development should include modern houses or modern infrastructure. For example, I studied in China for a while, and they had this ancient town named as Langzhong. So it was an ancient town, and the houses are still hundreds of years old there. And once you enter the gate, there are no ATM machines, there are no restaurants there, right? Everything is like it used to be hundreds of years ago. So there are ways of integrating development with heritage sites. The people there were actually quite happy with their lifestyle there as well. So there is no kind of planning or an effort to really understand culture or tradition or the mindsets of the locals before doing any kind of development projects.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Okay, so I actually have a question. So you different monuments जुन चाहिँ भत्केको हुन्छ त्यस्तो monuments and structures जुन rebuild गर्छ नि त्यति बेला चाहिँ कतिको त्यो authenticity चाहिँ कतिको maintain भइराछ त अहिलेको केसमा?
So that's a very good question. Thank you for that question. So as someone who loves history, it's quite upsetting to see many of the renovation works. For example, like I said, Rani Pokhari was about to become an artificial pond, right? So it was actually created by Pratap Malla by collecting waters from 58 sacred rivers from India and Nepal. So it was actually a holy site, not just a river pond. He built it for his queen, but it was a holy site because he collected waters from India and Nepal from different sacred rivers, and he did different rituals there. And the mayor, now he's the ex-mayor, wanted to make a coffee shop in Rani Pokhari. So that is the level of understanding of our politicians. If that is the case, we'll soon lose the authentic charm of our city. So Dharara, for example, right? So can you imagine Qutub Minar with a lift, right? Qutub Minar is a tower in a particular tower in India. Can you imagine Qutub Minar with a lift? Soon we might have escalators in Pashupatinath, right? So that is the level of understanding of the people. They don't try to recreate when they're renovating. So they just, just for the sake of renovation, they do it.
Yeah, that's really sad. तर अब यो level of understanding लाई चाहिँ हामीले कसरी increase गर्ने त?
So it's very important to get this idea among youth. So by telling them engrossing tales, by sharing the stories of their monuments, by making them feel proud about their own heritage. That is what is missing. So when I say Kokona was the second hydroelectric project in entire Asia, right? That is something to be proud of, right? So once people realize this fact, maybe such monuments will be looked after better or renovated for the future generations.
Yeah, okay. So any other questions?
Yeah, just one last. So I mean, I know it's kind of irrelevant यो question है, तर मलाई खोकना भनेर अहिलेसम्म लाइक हामीले खोकनाको कुरा गरिराख्दा यो याद आयो. अनि I know we've been talking about heritages अहिलेसम्म, तर मैले चाहिँ यो खोकनाको festival, are you aware about the Kokona festival? Sambid, त्यो goatलाई rip गर्ने in the pond and everything?
Yes.
Yeah, so what's your thoughts on that? Just wanted to know, like, from a perspective of a person who's like, really to culture, heritages and stuff. Yes. Let me know if it's irrelevant. Like, just to answer dinu parne chaina, but I'm just like curious.
Yes, so that's actually a very good question, right? So when I write articles about history, culture, or I post videos on TikTok about different historical monuments, people actually think I actually back every kind of culture or tradition, and I'm a firm believer that everything should be followed from one generation to the next. On the contrary, I actually I hate that festival, right? Because we have to actually change with time, right? We have to evolve with time. So any kind of culture which is brutal or which is not acceptable for this generation shouldn't continue. So yes, that's one of the dark side of following cultures, because there are a few rituals or traditions or festivals that should have left behind us, that should have been discontinued, but yes.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes, you're welcome.
So there are a few questions from the forum. One of them is, what do you tell about residents around heritage sites from Vishaka?
Yes, so what I usually do is I visit cultural sites or historical sites every week. I try to visit it as often as I can, and whenever I visit any site or any monument, any building, any temple, I try to get as much information as I can from the locals. So most of the time, the local residents are quite welcoming, right? But there are times when they actually don't know about the heritage in their own area or their own locality. They have no knowledge about the heritage sites in their own area as well. So the awareness is something that is lacking. So if I have to know about origin of certain monument or the legend, the history, mythology about that particular place, I have to actually talk to the older generation, 70, 80-year-old grandmother or grandfathers of that area to get the oral history from them. When it comes to younger generation, they lack the knowledge about it. And some are very passionate about it. When I say I'm going to write an article about it, they're more than willing to connect me with people who have information about that place. They give me extra knowledge. I've visited inside guthis to write about jatras. I've talked to priests inside temples, which is forbidden. So I've met a lot of local residents who are passionate about it, but most of them are the older generation. The younger generation, they don't actually care about this, most of the people that I've met. Although I have to say, going by the number of TikTok followers I have, most of them are very young and they have that desire to learn. Maybe they don't have the medium to learn, because if you look at courses of our school, they are quite boring, right? So I get a lot of messages. So one funny message that I got in TikTok was, I passed the social studies exam by following your account. So the courses are actually very boring for people. So if we are able to illustrate different historical events or different historical figures by using videos, by taking them on tours, by showing them photographs of different eras, by showing them paintings, maybe they will have that genuine desire to learn about this, about heritage.
Yeah, so we could say that local community बाट पनि खासै effort चाहिँ भएको छैन है यो conserve गर्नलाई. So any more questions? Okay, looks like we don't have any more questions. So our speaker is actually pretty popular in TikTok. You could drop your ID here. I mean, I follow him and I learned so much from each of his videos. So yeah, you guys could take a look at those videos too for more informative.
Yes, I think that's a good idea, actually. I'm not promoting myself because, but this is very important for us to know about different heritage sites, and I actually post videos on them. So you can follow me. My account is actually my full name, that is Sambid Bilas Pant. You can also follow me on Instagram, and that is Sambid Diary, SAMBIDIARY. So yes, this is where I use social media to reach out to people regarding heritage sites. I post my articles, videos on my social accounts, because you have to actually move with the changing times.
Thank you so much. It was really a wonderful, wonderful presentation. I'm sure all of us learned a lot. अब त्यो असनको बाटो हामी कति हिँडिरा हुन्छ हैन, त्यही पनि मलाई थाहा नै थिएन कि that was like first army barrack थियो अनि so much story behind that भनेर हैन. Yeah, so
yes, so I've actually spent my entire life in Kathmandu, and I managed to discover a new place every month. Every month there is one place I haven't been before. So you might think that it's a small city, but there is so much to learn, so much to see, so much to discover. So there are a lot of hidden places that I'm yet to explore or discover.
yeah. Okay, so and that was all for today's session, everybody. So this session will go up on YouTube. So if you want to send it to any of your friends who have missed it today, you could always do that. And stay tuned for our other sessions. Will come next month with another informative session. And yeah, that's all. I'll stop the recording.
Thank you.
Thank you.